Welcome. We are so excited to be here tonight. This is an exciting time. Happy New Year to everyone. While this isn't the start of a new school year, it is the start of a new board year for us. We are thrilled today to welcome 2 new members to our board and to officially take the oath of office for 3 of us. So thank you for being here. We'd like to just recognize and welcome several people in the room. We have some former board members here with us. We have legislators, mayors, city council, our foundation president, lots of family, teachers, friends. That really means a lot to us that you would all be here today, and we thank you so much for being here to support us at this time. We are going to start with a Pledge of Allegiance that will be led by Lisa Robinson, who is our administrator of schools, and followed by a reverence by Mr. Cody Curtis, also an administrator of schools.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
From Martin Luther King in Strength to Love. The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in the moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. The true neighbor will risk his position, his prestige, and even his life for the welfare of others. In dangerous valleys and hazardous pathways, he will lift some bruised and beaten brother to a higher and more noble life.
Thank you. All right, well, let's get to the business that we all came here for, and that is the oath of office. We have a new Salt Lake County clerk, Ms. Lainey Chapman, and it is great. It's an honor to have you here, and we will turn the time over to you.
There we go. Thank you so much for having me. It's quite an honor to be here in front of all of you. Thank you. This is a wonderful opportunity, and this is one of my favorite things that I get to administer as the new Salt Lake County clerk. I get to administer the oath of office for new board members for schools and different boards, so thank you for having me. Without further ado, can Brian come down, please?
Ready.
Okay. Will you please raise your right hand and repeat after me? I do solemnly swear that my full name is.
I do solemnly swear that my full name is Brian Wayne Barnett.
I swear to support, obey, and defend.
I swear to support, obey, and defend
The Constitution of the United States.
the Constitution of the United States,
And the Constitution of the State of Utah.
the Constitution of the State of Utah,
And discharge the duties of my office
and discharge the duties of my office
as Jordan School District Board Member, Precinct 2,
as Jordan School District Board Member, Precinct 2,
with fidelity.
with fidelity.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Tracy. You ready? Yeah. Will you please raise your right hand and repeat after me? I do solemnly swear that my full name is.
I do solemnly swear that my full name is Tracy Janes Miller.
I swear to support, obey, and defend
I swear to support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
and discharge the duties of my office
and discharge the duties of my office
as Jordan School District Board Member, Precinct 3,
as Jordan School District Board Member, Precinct 3,
with fidelity.
with fidelity.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you.
And last but certainly not least, will Lisa please come down? Are you ready? Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I do solemnly swear that my full name is
I do solemnly swear that my full name is Lisa Ann Dean.
I swear to support, obey, and defend
I swear to support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
and discharge the duties of my office
and discharge the duties of my office
as Jordan School District Board Member, Precinct 7,
of Jordan School District Board Member, Precinct 7,
with fidelity.
with fidelity.
Congratulations. Again, thank you so much for the opportunity for being here with you guys. Happy New Year.
Thank you, and thank you for being here. I think it's time for speeches then. Mr. Barnett, would you like to give a few remarks?
Do you want me to go up there or stay here?
I think yours fine.
By way of introduction, I just wanted to give a quick life sketch. This is the whole speech is targeted for less than 5 minutes, so don't worry. I was born in Anaheim, California in 1967 to Wayne and Cynthia Barnett. I'm glad they're here today. Second of 5 children. Grew up in Ogden, Utah. Went to high school and junior high up in Ogden, Utah. Went on a mission for the LDS Church to Argentina. By the way, they won the World Cup a few months ago. Some of you may have heard. And I came back. My girlfriend was still available. She was single. And I married her. And we have 8 children. 2 of them still at home. They're here tonight. And 6 are married. We have 14 grandchildren. That brings us current. I wanted to answer maybe just a few questions that some of you might have or that I've been asked. One of them was, or one question you might have is, why are you here, Mr. Barnett? And the reason I'm here is because my neighbor, some of you may know Mark Strong, he's a member of the Utah State Legislature. He asked me back in February, he said, Brian, you should consider running for the Jordan School Board because Matt Young, who I'm replacing, is stepping down. And so I said, well, what's involved? He says, well, why don't you come out to lunch with Matt and I? So we went out to lunch. I asked him a bunch of questions, how much time is involved. And some of you have probably been asked by your neighbors, suggested, hey, you should run for whatever. And I had been asked in the past that same question, and I had just said, nah, it's not the right time. But it happened to be the right time. I have some time available. And I thought, well, this is a good time to give back a little bit, in an elected position. So they convinced me. That's why I'm here. And I ran uncontested. I'm very grateful for that. I didn't want to. That was one of my biggest issues, is I didn't want to have to campaign. Another question might be, what are your qualifications for this position? The qualifications are, I'm a U.S. citizen, I'm over the age of 18, I'm a registered voter, and I live in the precinct that I represent. Those are the qualifications for a board member. All these men and women you see up here who are board members, that's how they qualify. Some of us don't have PhDs. Some of us haven't gone to school for 10 years. We're just like a lot of you, just regular people, part of the community, interested in the education of our children. However, I do have some life experience. I've raised 8 kids, still raising 2 more, been married for 35 years. I've been involved in small business. So, those are the kinds of things I bring to the table. People have asked me, well, where do you stand on this issue, this issue, this issue, controversial type issues? And every time I've told them, I don't know. I don't have enough information yet. That's my preferred way to make decisions, is to think through them, spend some time alone, talk them over with my wife sometimes, my brother, my parents, gather as much information as I can, then do my best to make the best decision possible. And my core values come from my religion. I'm Christian. I try to follow sound moral principles in all the decisions I make. So that's, I guess, part of my promise to you, is that I'll do my best to make the decision that I think is right. I appreciate this opportunity to serve you and to serve with these people up here, so thank you.
Well, thank you. It's truly an honor to serve on this board, and a humbling experience also. Being reelected and having to run a campaign, I recognize that as an incumbent, getting reelected is a reflection on how the whole entire district is doing. If people were not happy with our schools and with our district, I wouldn't be here today. And we have a great district. We have great schools. We're doing a lot of exciting and innovative things. We've got employees that are so dedicated. Our teachers, administrators, our support professionals just go above and beyond for our students every day. And one of the things I love about this position is being able to be in the schools and seeing firsthand things that happen, magic that happens every day in the lives of our students. And there is not another board in the state that is more invested, more involved, and works harder than this board. We truly do have a very dedicated and committed board that it has been an honor to be a part of. I just want to give a quick thank you to my family for their love and support and encouragement, and my husband for his hours of listening to me work through issues, and my kids who I'm not there a lot. This takes you away from home a lot. And they've just been nothing but supportive the whole time. My mom is a great example of community service and taught me that and instilled that principle within me. I'm so grateful for my parents. I believe in a public education system. It's the hallmark of our democracy. It's so important to our society that every child has the opportunity for a quality education. Every child has the opportunity to learn and to grow and to thrive in our education system. And that is so important to me, and I'm grateful for this opportunity to continue in that work. Thank you for your support, and I am honored again to be able to represent the constituents of District 3.
I didn't want it to be side view. Okay? Okay. I am a product of the Jordan School District. I went to West Jordan Middle School and I graduated from West Jordan High School. My kids are products of the Jordan School District. I have a daughter at West Jordan High School, a daughter at Joel P. Jensen Middle School, and a daughter at Columbia Elementary School. And my three boys have all graduated from West Jordan High School. I worked at West Jordan High School, and yesterday was my last day at Joel P. Jensen Middle School. My dad taught at West Jordan High School. My younger sister currently teaches at West Jordan High School. I love public education, and I love the schools in my area. I love the people in my area, and I am very humbled and excited to be in this position. I feel so humbled to be elected by the people that I know and the people that I don't know. And I really want to thank my family, my parents and siblings for being so civically minded and active in the community, for their example of just stepping out and serving in the community. I'm so thankful for my husband for picking up the slack. It's hard for him to believe that anything that happens in a meeting after 9 o'clock is worthwhile. And I'm so thankful for my kids for their support. And my brother walked for me. I'm so thankful for Jen and her support and her just consideration in explaining so many things to me. I want to thank Cammie Whitchurch, who I ran against. She made going to the board meetings so much easier, to have somebody who is friendly to, the board members were friendly too, and I want to thank them for reaching out and just being kind and accepting and open-hearted and willing to work with me and explain things to me. But it was so nice to have Cammie there to discuss the different issues with. Anyway, I'm really excited and, like I said, humbled to be a part of this. And I'm really excited about things that are happening. I hope that we're on the cusp of really great things in public education in the Jordan School District and even in the state of Utah. Thanks.
Thank you. I am excited for our new board members and to move forward with this new board. Every 2 years, we also re-elect our leadership, and we are going to do that right now. And then after that, we will have a reception. We've got some nice refreshments in the back, and we'll spend some time visiting, so I hope everyone will stick around for that. And then after the reception, we will continue on with our study session. So I will turn the time now to Mr. John Larson, our business administrator, to conduct those elections. And actually, before you start, I just want to quickly give a thank you to Marilyn and Bryce. The three of us have been serving together on the executive committee and have worked really well together. I really appreciate the opportunity to serve. I appreciate their support and all they've done. Bryce has got just an incredible command of policy and a memory that, he just remembers everything. I rely on him so much to help me remember where we're at and what we're doing. And Marilyn, her experience with the district and understanding of how things work have just been an incredible asset. So thank you so much for this opportunity to serve as executive committee. And thank you, Marilyn and Bryce, for all you've done for me. Okay, Mr. Larson.
Well, I think it would be good to give you a round of applause, the current board leadership. With apologies to the audience that's here, I'm going to face them. I'm going to go over the process that we'll use to elect the board officers will start with the position of board president. Then we will go to board first vice president, and lastly, the board second vice president. Each position's election is going to follow the same process. First, I will start with accepting nominations. Nominations do not require a second, and any board member can nominate any board member, including oneself. Following each nomination, I will ask if that board member is willing to serve in that position. If they answer affirmatively, then they will be considered a nominee for the position. If they decline, then they won't be considered a nominee. After it appears clear that there are no further nominations, I'll accept a motion to close the nominations, and I do need a second for that motion. I will then pause and ask for any questions or comments, and then the voting on the motion to close nominations will occur by raise of hand. So this is a little different than a normal board meeting. I need you to raise your hand as you are voting. I will then call out the board members' names so that those that are listening or watching can know who has, how they have voted. I will also ask for an opposing vote. The motion to close nominations does require a 2/3 majority. So I need 5 of you to vote for that. Then we will move on to voting for the position that is up. And I'll do that by first starting by asking if there are any questions or comments by any members of the board. I will then ask for a vote by raise of hand, and once again mention those that are raising their hand for those not in attendance. The candidates will be voted on in the order in which they were nominated. So the first nominee will be voted on first. And the first candidate to receive a simple majority, so 4 hands in the air, will be elected to that board officer position. And then the voting will cease for that position. So even though the first, let's just say the first nominee gets 4 votes, there won't be a vote on the second nominee because the first one already has the majority. I would please ask the audience to remain quiet during the proceedings until I announce a winner. At that time, I will invite applause, and you can thank and cheer on the winner. So before we begin, does any board member have a question about how this is going to take place? Okay. So I don't get confused. I've got some notes here. We will start with the office of president. So I will now take nominations for the office of president.
I would like to nominate Tracy Janes Miller for president.
Board Member Miller, are you willing to serve in that position?
Yes.
Okay, Board Member Miller will be considered the first nominee. Are there any other nominations?
I would like to nominate Marilyn Richards for president.
Thank you. Board Member Richards, are you willing to serve in that position of president?
Thank you for the nomination, but I would need to decline because of personal home problems. Thank you.
You.
Mr. Larson, I move that we close the nominations.
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved by Board Member Dunford and seconded by Board Member Robinson to close nominations. Before voting on the closing of nominations, are there any questions or comments from members of the board? Very well, then by the raise of hand, please raise your hand if you are willing to close nominations. And all 7 board members' hands are in the air. So I won't ask for an opposing vote. And this is kind of just formality at this point, but any questions or comments before voting on the position? Very well, then all those willing to support and vote for Board Member Miller to serve as President of the Board of Education, please raise your hand. And all 7 board members' hands are in the air. So I'd invite the audience to please congratulate President Miller. Now on to the position of First Vice President. Same process. I'll take nominations for First Vice President.
I would like to nominate Nikki George as first vice.
Board Member George, are you willing to serve in the position of First Vice President?
Yes, sorry.
Thank you. Board Member George is a nominee. Any other nominations?
Mr. Larson, I move that we close nominations.
Been moved by Board Member Dunford to close nominations. Do I have a second?
I second.
There we go. Okay, Board Member Dean has seconded the motion to close nominations. Are there any questions or comments before voting on that? Very well. By raise of hand, if you are supportive of closing nominations, would you please? And all 7 board members have raised their hand. Again, you guys are making my job way too easy on this. Okay, and then before, again, formality, but any questions or comments before voting? Very well. All those willing to vote for Board Member George for the position of First Vice President, would you please raise your hand? And all 7 board members have raised their hand. Will the audience please congratulate her with me? Position of Second Vice President. I'll now take nominations for that position.
I nominate Marilyn Richards for second vice president.
Ms. Richards, are you willing to serve in the position of Second Vice President?
Yes, I am.
Very well. Board Member Richards will be a nominee for Second Vice President. Any other nominations?
I'd like to nominate Daryl Robinson as second vice president.
Good. Board Member Robinson, are you willing to serve in the position of Second Vice President?
Yes.
Right. Board Member Robinson will be our second nominee. Any other nominees?
Mr. Larson, I move that we close nominations.
Very good. Board Member Dunford has moved to close
I'll
nominations.
second.
And was that Board Member Dean? My eyes were down. Okay. Very well. And Board Member Dean has seconded the motion to close nominations. Are there any questions or comments before voting to close nominations? Very good. Would all those willing to support closing nominations please raise their hand? all 7 board members' hands are raised. Okay, so then before voting, are there any questions or comments from board members on these 2 nominees or the position of second vice president? Okay, so board member Richards was nominated first. So would those willing to vote for board member Richards for the position of second vice president, please raise your hand. We have board member Richards and board member Miller raising their hands. Would those willing to support board member Robinson to serve in the position of second vice president, please raise your hands. And we have board members Robinson, Dean, George, Dunford, and Barnett raising their hands, which means board member Robinson is the second vice president. Please congratulate him with me. President Miller, turn the time to you.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. We will now take a break. We'll plan on starting study session at 5, unless everyone's left before then, and then we'll start it sooner.
It's the close.
Thank you all for being here. We really do appreciate everyone for being here today, for all of your support for us and for our district. Thank you.
as he's up at the U.
Hey, we are on. This is the Jordan School District Board of Education study session. It is January 10th, 2023, and we have board members Dunford, Barnett, Dean, Richards, George, and Miller here, and we'd like to excuse board member Robinson, who cannot join us the rest of this evening. He had a death in the family. We also have Dr. Godfrey, Dr. Anderson, and Mr. Larson, and our attorney, Mr. Van Komen, here. We are going to, I am like way more nervous today than ever. So help me.
Still over here, Tracy.
Thank you. Help me keep this going. I'm just, okay. I guess first time around you don't know what you're getting into, and the second time you do. And so we are starting out with our professional development board book study. This is something, as a board, we started talking about our mission statement and redoing that, and that led into doing a portrait of a graduate process for our district. And we are moving down the road for that process right now. And as a board, as we started learning about that process, we asked what book we could read, and the book was recommended, Redefining Student Success. And so board members all have a copy of that, and we've decided over the next 3 months we will just read that to kind of bring us up to speed, so we're all speaking a similar language and on a similar page when it comes to the portrait of a graduate process. So this will be our book study discussion, and I will just open it up. If any board members have any insights that they would like to share from their reading, now is your opportunity. Is there anyone that would like to start?
I'll start. Two things really resonated with me, and the first, now I've got the digital copy, so I don't know if I can give page numbers. I'll do my best. In the introduction, I loved the definition of a 21st century student. This is in the section Preparing for Challenges and Opportunities, almost like the third paragraph to the end. Right in the middle of the paragraph, he said, these students are prepared to survive and thrive. Together they provide a compelling profile of a 21st century learner. And then I love this, and I really am honing in on this, especially as we move forward with the portrait of the graduate. They are prepared to ask hard questions, find important solutions and solve them creatively, advocate for themselves and others, and engage others to partner with them. That is probably, of all the things I've read in the last couple of months about this subject, that is the best I've found. That's the 21st century learner can ask hard questions, not afraid, bold, is not afraid to ask hard questions, can find solutions and solve them creatively, can advocate for themselves and others, and can engage others to partner with them. So I just absolutely loved that. The other thing I've loved about chapter 1 is I really want to define the readiness gap. To me, that is the essence of everything I've been saying and asking, because I believe what we're hearing is there is a gap between what we're producing and what is most effective in going out and being successful in the world today. And that's a hard question to ask. What's the gap between the product we're producing and the need? So I said this before. Clayton Christensen once used the analogy about McDonald's milkshakes, and he said, what is it that you're hiring a McDonald's milkshake to do? What's the job you hire the milkshake to do? And McDonald's needed to understand that because it came as a total shock to them. Do you know what the most popular job is that people hire a McDonald's milkshake for? Do you know when they buy the most milkshakes? In the morning. In the morning. And the reason they buy them is because the viscosity makes it last a long time, and it's for a long commute. They want something that they can be sucking on as they travel a large distance. That's the job that McDonald's milkshakes are being hired for. So my question is, what is the job, or what are the jobs our graduates are being hired to fill? And what's the gap between what we're producing and what that job asks them to have? If the answer is there's no gap, great. I'd love to know that. If the answer is there's a minor gap and we just need to make some tweaks, fantastic. But I'm also prepared to hear there's a big gap between the jobs our graduates are being hired to fill, readiness, and what we as a district are producing. Now, again, in saying that, I am not in any way saying teachers aren't doing the job. I'm saying the world has changed. And if we show up in last battle's armor, we're going to be destroyed. And so there's a humble factor that says, is the armor we're producing sufficient for today's battle? And that's not in any way to say that we haven't very effectively armed students. But has the battle changed? Has the weaponry changed? And we haven't. Those are the questions I'm asking. And I very much liked that this book began with those very questions. What's the readiness gap? And here's the vision we boldly need to have.
Thank you. That readiness gap too, that really stood out to me, because so much of our focus has been achievement gap. We've always talked about the achievement gap, which is there. That's real, that exists. But so much of the focus has been on, here's the math scores and the language arts scores and the science scores, and here's the gap. Here's the students who aren't doing as well. But it's now the conversation is starting to shift towards that readiness gap. Do students getting what they need in order to be successful at work and as successful citizens? So it's a shift in thinking. Okay, anyone else?
I'll comment. Maybe to piggyback a little bit on what Mr. Dunford shared. Another aspect that they talk about a little bit is to define student success. And I think a portion of that definition includes being ready for the jobs that are available. But I think another aspect of that readiness gap is being ready for life, not just jobs. There's a lot involved in life, not just a job. A job is a critical component of it, but as we talk about how to define student success, I would like to include more than just career stuff, finances, budget, how to get along with people, how to discipline. I mean, there's just a host of things, life-type skills, that I would like to include in our definition of I'm ready for life. I've closed that gap as much as I can. There was also one other thing I wanted to comment on in the introduction that I didn't necessarily agree with. He says, this is on page XIV. What is that? 14. Students need to spend less time listening to lectures on the U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights, facts that most forget very quickly, and more time learning the skills of critical thinking, weighing evidence, reasoning, and media literacy. I guess I take an opposite stance on that. What better way to learn those skills? Learning skills of critical thinking, weighing evidence, reasoning, creative problem solving, they talk about a little bit later, than to use the examples of the best group of men that have ever been on the earth at the same time, the founding fathers. Use examples from their lives about how they solved problems, how they got along with each other, how they compromised. So that was just one area that I thought, I don't want my children spending less time listening to lectures on the U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights. But anyway.
Important lesson. Hey, Lisa.
I was moving my microphone, so you could probably tell I had something. So I really enjoyed chapter 2, where it talks about how the adults in the lives of the students need to model the collaboration and the creativity and the critical thinking. And in order to do that, teachers and administrators need to have permission to fail, to try innovative and creative things, and in order to approach and attain a better product and a better lesson, or anyway, and I really appreciated that, how the adults need to be able to model those steps that are required for creativity and innovation and collaboration, which includes failure and evaluating what went well, what didn't go well. Anyway, I really appreciated that idea.
Anyone else?
So I feel really excited about the overreaching vision of what Portrait of a Graduate can become, and really confused about the small steps to get there. And so I really appreciated kind of the breakdown in the beginning. Like we keep talking about, we're going to go to all of these stakeholders and we're going to get input and opinions. But something that actually shocked me was when it talked about the size of the people that you would have on your 3 to 4 month board, if you will. It said 30 to 75 members of the education and broader community in a 3 to 4 month process that will ultimately lead to broad-based support for this vision. And I think that statement just opened my eyes to the scope of what it takes to really get something that has ownership and an anchor in Jordan School District, a real view of the needs that are around us. And then as they talked about reaching out to parents, and the continual theme that they received back, and I'm sure something that we're going to receive as well, is the statement, we're giving you our kids, make their lives better than ours. And what a profound responsibility that is for us. And then, of course, being able to take this not as a document or an exercise, but a living document that is continually being referred back to, that is driving our decisions, that is driving the way we're choosing to spend our budget, and that we're constantly reevaluating and updating. When it mentioned that most districts every 4 to 5 years redo their Portrait of a Graduate process. It just helped me to understand the scope of what we're really getting into, and that if we're all in and we want to do it right, we need to be ready for a real process here.
Thank you. One thing that struck me in that second chapter that talked about the green light culture is that you know, in order to kind of change our organization, change the way we're looking at things, we have to have a culture where it's okay for people to try new things. We can't penalize failure. Failure needs to be okay too, because that's part of trying new things. And a culture of collaboration. It talked about, you know, like back in the 80s, teaching was very much a silo. You just, the teacher in the room and that was it. And now there's so much more collaboration and working together through PLCs and whatnot. But the thing that I really liked about that is I think our district is well on the way to having that culture. And part of that is Dr. Godfrey's what his saying that he always says: be curious, be intentional, be united. And that's what he stood up in front of from all of our teachers at the Expo Center at the beginning of the year, and said, be curious, be intentional, be united. And it's that be curious piece that is a green light, you know, to our district. Be curious, you know, be willing to think about things in a different way and to try new things. And if you didn't go in the district office during Christmas time, the Christmas tree in the lobby had ornaments that said, be curious, be intentional, and be united on it. I loved it. I thought it was so cute.
Question on that comment, just out of curiosity. I'm curious. How much of a green light do our teachers have currently? I mean, how much can they do? I mean, how do we constrain them?
I think that, if I may, we do work toward a green light culture, and I appreciate those comments. The intentional part is an important follow-up to the curious part. So we're asking questions, hey, there might be a better way. Are we doing things with purpose instead of doing things because it's what we're used to doing? And we encourage teachers to be able to innovate and do the things that they feel they need to do for their students. Sometimes I worry that we haven't communicated that effectively enough all the way to the classroom, though, because I think people at all levels, in all positions, may feel restrictions that we aren't actually imposing, because culturally they understand that this is how it's supposed to go. So when I meet with teachers, I've started, or I'm going to start, I haven't asked this question yet, but one of the questions I've added to the list is, what are some of the things that you feel we're expecting of you right now? Because the feedback I get sometimes is, well, we have to do this. And I say, well, actually, no, you don't. We don't expect that. So I think we're doing better and better, but I think we have to be very intentional about clarifying what is required and what is not required.
And I've had teachers come to me and say, well, we can't do this. We were told the board decided on that. And I've looked at them like, I have no idea what you're talking about. The board's never made any such decision. But somehow it got communicated down. And then I also think a lot of teachers, you know, will tell you, well, our hands are tied because of the legislature. And a lot of that's true. The legislature puts all sorts of strings on things. But I've had legislators come to me and say, well, what are those strings? You know, let us know. Do we need to work on legislation to remove them? And we need our teachers who, you know, if they feel like something would be helpful, but they can't do it, to speak up and let's find out why can't you do that? Is that, you know, that's something that the board has unknowingly placed, or is that something the legislature did, and can we get that changed there? So it'd be great if we could permeate the whole culture of, instead of just saying, well, I can't do that, of what's stopping you and what can we change?
And I have a question. I talked to Carolyn Goff, and reading the book, I thought, oh, we're supposed to be doing this collaboration. So the administration puts all together all this stuff, and the board observes and discusses. I would like a better understanding of the district's timeline for this. And I know I've been to the meetings and listened to Carolyn at the meetings too, but I don't know, is there a firm kind of timeline of how we're going about this? I don't know.
An update on where we're at in the process.
So you'll receive a draft SOQ, and you can weigh in on whether we're asking vendors for the right stuff. And then the SOQ is a statement of qualifications. Yes. And that allows vendors to say, yes, we can provide what you're looking for. So then that's the company that we'll partner with to go through this process. And with them, we'll establish a timeline for what that looks like.
We're just at the very, very beginning, getting in the mindset of it by reading the book. Like, to help us understand the process.
That's right. And I
Okay,
think this will
thank you.
prepare you well for that SOQ. So when I send that to you, just take a look and say, yeah, if we get a vendor that can do these things, that's what we're looking for. Then the next decision is just how involved do we want that vendor to be, as opposed, what's the portion that we'll do for ourselves, and how much do we want them to guide and be involved in that process. And I think the timeline is going to be a really important aspect of this decision, because we want to give enough time so that we can really go deep in connecting with our community, but we don't want to take so long that people say, hey, whatever happened to that, what was it, portrait of a graduate, what was that? Where did that end up? So we want to balance it out, and I think once we choose a company, that will help us determine the timeline.
And now I remember the board meeting where she was talking about the different companies and the
Yeah.
different products. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
At one point in time, this whole process is probably like a full year-long process. It's not quick.
Lisa, if you don't like that timeline, change it. You are in a position to now say, I would like to change the timeline. You are not servant here. And so, feel empowered to say, I'm uncomfortable with this, and I'd like to recommend that we change the timeline.
So I'm trying to remember some of the nuts and bolts that we talked about that night. So Carolyn kind of suggested 18 months, and I felt like we said, could we compromise it? Well, if that's helpful at all.
Oh, I'm not concerned with the timeline. I'm curious.
Okay, does anyone have anything else they want to share?
The only thing for me that resonated, the author suggests at the beginning that employers are more interested in what skills students have mastered than in what degrees they have earned. And while I don't disagree with it, I also I think there's both can be true. Yes to both. As I talk to my family members who own small businesses and run businesses, one's an engineer, one's in the medical field, you need certifications. You need those diplomas. You need those certificates in order to say, yes, I've got this. I know this level of competence. It's their statement of qualifications, if you will. But they will also say in the same sentence that I want to hire people who are good team, can work together in a team, good communicators. So I think as we are on this journey, this Jordan journey of Portrait of a Graduate, that we can say yes to both. It's not either or, it's yes and I think we can give them the skills they need while also saying, as a graduate, you earn this diploma which certifies your qualifications as a Jordan School District graduate.
I would echo that. Portrait of a Graduate is one way to say it. I like to think of it as meaning of a diploma. When you get that diploma, what does it mean? What does it represent? I'd like to, I think we're already there in many respects, but I'd like to enhance the meaning behind a Jordan District diploma. Oh, you graduated from this school. Well, that means that you have, if you earned that diploma, then you've had these experiences, and it's broad preparation for life and careers. And I think it has to be broad because we don't know what's ahead, and there will be a lot of changes, and there will be a lot of things that kids need to be ready for that we don't even know about. And so those skills that they can build on going forward are I think, an essential element of what they ought to come away with when they earn a diploma from Jordan. So.
I thought it was interesting. They highlighted the input they got from a business leader who said, I can teach them the skills in my industry when I hire them, but there are things I can't teach. I can't teach grit. I can't teach consistency and responsibility. Those have to already be obtained before I would even want to hire them. And that's like that overarching concept that we need to give our graduates.
Hey, thank you. Anyone else?
So there was just this one sentence that I really liked at the end of chapter 2, and it says we have to stop behaving as though it's okay for some kids not to be engaged. And I thought that's a good guiding idea.
Every child. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you. That was part 1. We will do part 2 next month in our study session in February. Our next agenda item is board compliance with open meeting law training. This is a legal requirement that all board members must be trained in open meeting laws every year. So we will turn the time to Mr. Van Komen, our legal counsel, for that training.
Thank you, President Miller. All right, I'm going to go ahead and, before I get started, just make sure, I think all of you had the opportunity to get the School Boards Association handbook on open meetings. John has a copy. That's a very good resource. Our office actually prepares that and updates that every year. I've also provided you with a PDF copy of that you can get on Board Docs. And it changes slightly every year. So you may have had, some of you may have prior year versions. It's always best to have the most current. The most current version is 2022 because that's through the legislative session of 2022. That will be updated after the legislative session. So with that, I'll go ahead and I have a PowerPoint that you can follow along. I didn't give it to you beforehand because I want you to follow along, and I have a quiz at the end, and so, you know, didn't want you to cheat, and so be prepared. So Open and Public Meeting Act is in Utah Code Section 52.4, 101 through 305. These are also kind of known as the Sunshine Laws. The intent is to help the public have some transparency. There are legitimate reasons where the public should not have access to information, and they don't necessarily always agree with that. The Open and Public Meetings Act applies to meetings of public bodies. It's very important that you look to the legislative language in analyzing things like open and public meeting law, because some terms have specific meanings based on the act. They may differ slightly from what your ordinary purpose, your ordinary interpretation might be. That's just the standard with any legislative action. Determining whether the Open Meetings Act applies requires deciding if there's a public body and if there is a meeting of that public body. And the school board is very clearly a public body within the definition of the statute. It is the legislative body of a political subdivision. It has more than one member. It spends public money, and it makes decisions about public matters. So the bigger issue typically is, what is a meeting as defined under the Act? And for purposes of the Act, a meeting occurs when a quorum of a public body is convened to talk about, hear from the public about, or do something about a matter that is subject to the body's authority. So that's pretty broad, and often if there is a quorum, it's better to be safe and consider it a meeting, but there is a specific statutory definition. A quorum of the body is convened when an authorized person calls members together for the purpose of a meeting and more than half of the body's members are present. Now, that doesn't mean that you can just get together if the board president doesn't formally call a meeting. The intent is not to say, well, a meeting was never called, so we're all here talking about this, but it's not a meeting. But generally, it's when an authorized person calls a meeting and more than half of the board members are present. When is a gathering of board members not a meeting? Basically, even though a majority of the board's members are present, it's not a meeting if it's not convened or when it's not to conduct public business. So this is your chance gathering is not a meeting. A social gathering is not a meeting. You were not convened for the USBA meeting, even though you were all in a location together. You weren't there to specifically address some of those issues. It's also not a meeting where no money is spent Only administrative or operational matters are discussed, and no formal action is taken or needed. Sometimes this could be board training or some district sessions with administrators, but be careful not to try to wiggle yourself out of calling it a meeting. Just saying, oh, well, we're not taking any formal action, or we're not spending any money, or we're not really discussing. I mean, there are some circumstances where it's not, but again, better to be cautious. But that is part of the specific statutory language. Also, if board members are present at a chance or social gathering, care should be taken not to discuss district business, because the Act specifically prohibits using chance or social meetings to circumvent the Act. So requirements for a proper open meeting are generally you give proper notice, you meet at the proper place or location, you act within the scope of the noticed agenda, and you keep a proper record. So public notice, when it's given and what's included, you have your annual notice. And this is where the board establishes an annual meeting schedule. The board gives notice of that schedule after its adoption, listing the when and where for each meeting, date, time, and location. There's also 24-hour notice, which in addition, for each individual meeting, the board must give notice of the when, where, and what of the meeting, the date, time, location, and agenda. Now, these are general, right? You give the best notice that you can.
And our practice has always been to post Friday before the Tuesday meeting.
Right. And I've included there that there are some exceptions. For example, if there's a legitimate emergency meeting, and we'll cover that, that can be shorter than 24-hour notice. And then there are certain meeting topics, for example, a budget hearing, a truth and taxation hearing, that have additional notice requirements under other laws. So how is public notice generally given? You post it at the office. And as board members, you typically are not, as involved in this matter. You have people like John who oversee that. Yeah. The principal office of the public entity, or if there is none, where the meeting is going to be held. So you also have to post it online and on the Utah Public Notice website. You're probably all aware that there is a public notice website that's sort of standardized it in addition. One thing that you may not be aware is that we send notices to be properly noticed to the news media. And that is a local media correspondent or a general circulation newspaper in the district. And so the administration has sort of policies and procedures. Lisa probably has a list of people. A media can also sign up to get notices on the public notice website. But you should be aware that notice is going out to the media.
Question on that one, the news media. Our obligation is just to let them know. They're not obligated to print it, right?
Correct. It's just you provide the notice to them. And that may seem a little antiquated because it's so easy now for people to get notice. So for us to have to affirmatively provide it is, we still do, but there are lots of ways they can sign up so they get it, even if they're not the actual person. It doesn't have to be everybody who asked to be on a list or anything like that. If it's an electronic meeting with an anchor location, and an anchor location is typically, you have a location, and we'll deal with this, where people can come and monitor the activities. You also post the notice at the anchor location. Sometimes if there's an electronic meeting, this is the location. Sometimes it's at the district office. So we post the notice there. I've noted that under certain health and safety circumstances, this legislation came into effect during COVID. You can have an electronic meeting with no anchor location required, but there are other specifics that we would have to satisfy. And typically, this board is not elected to do that, even under those circumstances. In the case of an emergency for public notice, you do the best that you can. If unforeseen circumstances make it necessary for the board to hold an emergency meeting to consider emergency or urgent matters, the 24-hour notice requirement can be disregarded and the meeting can be held if the meeting record, if the meeting record should reflect the circumstances and reasons for justifying the emergency meeting. Sometimes there may be a personnel matter that comes up, a student safety issue. There may be something that was just unforeseen. And in that circumstance, the board gives the best notice practicable, and that's the actual statutory language, best notice practicable, of the time, place, and topics of the emergency meeting. And a majority of the board must authorize the meeting. So there needs to be an attempt to contact each board member. That may not even be possible, but there has to be at least a majority of the board who says, yeah, let's go ahead and have the emergency meeting. In an emergency, meeting in the proper location means that the board fulfills this requirement by holding the meeting at the location identified in the notice. You can't notice it up to be one place and show up somewhere else and have a valid meeting. Where the meeting is a workshop or an executive session held on the same day as a regularly scheduled board meeting, the meeting usually must be held in the same location. And that typically is not a problem here. But for example, if you were meeting twice during the day, you want to make sure that you comply with certain requirements. If the board is holding an electronic meeting, usually you must establish an anchor location and provide facilities for public to attend the open portions of the meeting. Again, it's just the open portions. They're not entitled to monitor properly conducted closed meeting. It's also worth noting that boards of education are subject to an additional open meeting requirement apart from the Open Meetings Act. In general, a board of education must meet within the geographic boundaries of the school district. You can meet outside for a site visit if the visit allows board members to experience something that relates to their responsibilities, which are not available within the district, and no action or no vote or action is taken. So, for example, if you needed to visit some facility or something like that, you could actually have a meeting there, but you can't take any action while you're there.
So when you put in general, are there any other exceptions anywhere for that?
The disaster and local emergency that's at the bottom. The idea is, I think here is, you're supposed to conduct the meetings within your district. You're not supposed to have meetings like when you go out of state for conferences and that sort of thing. There may always be exceptions. You know, it's very hard for me to speak in superlatives and absolutes. I'm like John that way. This is important. You must act within the scope of the notice. So the 24-hour notice or the best practicable notice must include the agenda for the meeting, which must be reasonably specific about the topics to be considered, with each topic listed under an agenda item. I think the board notices are generally very appropriate and good in this district. That's important because the board may take final action only on a topic which was included in the agenda and in the meeting notice. Again, the exception for the emergency meetings. But so if something is not properly noticed up, even if it's important, you may have difficulty taking action that's final. There are circumstances where we can cure that if it's absolutely necessary by ratifying it, but it's basically you're holding you have to put it on the next agenda so that it can properly be ratified or reconfirmed. If a member of the public raises a topic which is not on the agenda, the presiding board member may allow discussion on the matter, but no final action may be taken on the topic. So, for example, in public open comment, people may say something. Generally, we don't engage with the public in that, but you can, for example, say, would you like to put this on a future agenda or something along those lines? But this is not intended to invite people to come and talk about something and engage in something. Sometimes people feel like if they come to the public comment section, the board is obligated to discuss those matters, and that's certainly not the case. And you also have your own policy on what's appropriate. Proper records of an open meeting. Again, typically John and Lisa, they would handle this, but the board must keep written minutes and a recording of its open meetings. However, if the meeting is a site visit or a traveling tour, and you don't take the votes for action, then only written minutes are required. And then the board must timely make these records available to the public. And I'm not going to go into the detail there, but there are some specifics as to when and how that's made available. Written minutes must include the date, time, and location of the meeting, the board members present, what was discussed, details of the votes taken, a listing of others who were recognized and allowed to provide information, and a summary of the information provided, and other information which is a record of the meeting that a board member asked to be included. So if there's something specific you want included in the minutes, you can always say, please include this in the minutes, or these specific comments in the minutes if you feel it's that important. The recording has to be complete and unedited and must include all open portions of the meeting from the beginning to the end. It should contain all of the substantive content of the meeting, and the recording must be identified by the date, time, and place of the meeting. What about public participation? An open meeting is not the same as a public hearing, where members of the public have a right to make comments. Although many school boards set aside time, the Open Meetings Act does not require this currently. There is proposed legislation that would require that, but certain other laws do require school boards to hold public hearings. Again, we've talked about the budget process. And members of the public are entitled to make their own recording of an open meeting so long as it does not interfere with the conduct of the meeting. So, media can come and record. I don't know that they can come and make a big production of it or get in the way of you. But people, if you see somebody making a recording, by the statute, they have that right. So, what are the requirements for a proper closed meeting? And this is where you should pay particular attention, because there's always a tendency to wonder, is this a proper closed subject? First of all, it must be in a properly noticed open meeting. So we always, before there's a closed meeting, you have to convene an open meeting. And that includes all of the notices, et cetera. You must authorize the closed meeting. And that meeting has to be for one of the typical 7 permitted purposes. Typically for a school board, there are 7 permitted purposes. And you must keep the required records or documentation of the closed meeting. So to authorize a closed meeting, the board must first be convened in an open meeting. There must be a successful motion to hold a closed meeting, and it requires a vote of at least 2/3 of the board members present. Typically, when this board goes into closed session, somebody makes a motion and a second, and if it's unanimous, the record reflects that it's, more than 2/3. If there's anybody who does vote negatively, there should sort of be a roll call vote, and I think we make the proper record, but you should be aware of that. It needs to be 2/3 of a vote to go in the closed session. A school board is never required by the act to close a meeting, even when that act permits it to do so. The board must, in the open portion of the meeting, announce the reason or reasons for holding the closed meeting, the location where the closed meeting will be held. That's an actual requirement, and we don't necessarily always say that. It's sort of presumed that it's in the same room or something like that. But typically, it really is a requirement.
Question?
Yes.
A closed meeting is our option to discuss one of those or of the 7.
Of the permitted, correct. And we'll talk about those.
We're not required to go into closed meeting to talk about any of those 7 items. We're legally okay to talk about them in open meeting, but we choose to do it in a closed. Is that right?
Typically, yeah. The reason you go into closed is because there's a legitimate reason to go into closed, and the board feels it's in the best interest to discuss that in a closed. And as we go over those topics, maybe you'll see why. But there may be times when you don't elect to go into a closed meeting, even though you could.
So if we have one of those 7 items to discuss, we don't have to do it in a closed meeting.
Correct. And again, this is just included in the minutes of the open meeting, the reason for going in the closed session. Now, that doesn't mean you talk about the specifics of the closed meeting, but you announce when you talk about the reasons, it's one of the permitted purposes. And so the permitted purposes are, for school boards, there's typically 7. Discussion of the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual. Again, this is, it's worth noting here that this isn't limited to employees of the district. It's not limited to students of the district. It's any individual. So it's broader. I know, oftentimes it's sort of shorthand. We're going to talk about personnel. I think we've kind of gotten away from that, and we try to refer to the character, professional competence, physical or mental health of an individual, because it's a broader subject. However, there is an exception, and the board may not, in a closed session, interview anyone, discuss applicants, or have any discussions about filling a vacancy or temporary absence of a board member. That's different from any other position. You can have closed session for superintendents, for other administrative positions. It's just you can't have a closed session if you are replacing a board member, and that's happened before. This board has been through that process. Second is strategy sessions to discuss collective bargaining. So this is a little bit more narrow than just collective bargaining or negotiations. Often we refer to this as negotiations, but it really is strategy sessions to discuss collective bargaining. Strategy sessions to discuss pending or reasonably imminent litigation. And again, this is not just any legal matter. It is pending or reasonably imminent litigation. Strategy sessions to discuss real estate acquisition transactions, purchase, sale, exchange of real property. If public discussion will reveal the value of the property or prevent the board from obtaining the best possible terms. And often it's this last clause that's very important. If you don't do something in closed session, you lose the opportunity to get the best possible terms for the district. Strategy sessions to discuss real estate sale transactions if certain other notice requirements are met. So this is a more narrow, this is just selling. It's not as broad. Discussion regarding deployment of security, personnel, devices, or systems. And obviously, there are some security measures you want people to know about, but there are others that if you talk about them openly, that defeats the whole purpose of a security. So you have the option to discuss security personnel, devices, or systems. And then certain confidential procurement functions of the school board. And this is rare, and there are certain requirements that would need to be done, but you can go into closed session if you're acting in a procurement body function. For closed meeting,
And not the 8th one, Paul. Is that not
which is your 8th?
investigative proceedings regarding allegations of criminal conduct?
There is one, allegations regarding criminal conduct.
Enforcement?
I think typically if we're going to be dealing with those, we can cover that under the character competency. And the role of a school board really is not criminal investigation. So I think it's just safer to not. Some boards I think have gotten in trouble if they rely on that too much. But that is one, and I actually cut that slide from this presentation. Closed record documentation is for a meeting to discuss collective bargaining, litigation, real estate purchases, real estate sale, procurement matters. The board must record and may keep detailed written minutes of the meeting. So certain topics you have to record, and you may also keep minutes. Typically, I would just recommend you just make the recording. That recording must be complete and unedited, contain the date and time, list each board member as present or absent, and identify by names others present, except where doing so would infringe the confidentiality needed for the meeting purpose. Any written minutes should disclose the content of the meeting and also include the terms required for the recordings. Minutes of closed session, it's just, I think generally, unless there's a real reason to, and we'll have some exceptions to the recordings next, but I wouldn't recommend that. But you have that option to as a board decide if that's what you want to have done. If the closed meeting is held exclusively for the purposes of the allowed discussions about an individual or security arrangements, no recording or minutes are required. You can also have sequential sort of on a specific topic. If you're only going to talk about individuals or security matters, you can turn off the recording for those sessions. But in that circumstance, the presiding officer must sign a sworn statement affirming that the sole purpose for the closed meeting was for a permitted closed purpose where you don't have to record. And given the policy reasons underlying the exception for these subjects, good practice would be to document the meeting with the affirmation and not keep minutes or a recording. The idea here is so you can be very open and frank, have these discussions, and they don't come back and aren't used against you.
Well, can I interrupt you
Yes.
for just a minute? Sorry. I was just looking at our policy, and one of the reasons that we have listed would be student appeals. What would that fall under in the closed session?
It's really the character competency
That's
of an
character and
individual exception.
competency.
So, it's yeah, it's also potentially arguable that I don't need to say that on the record. So anyway, so this is kind of a summary. A Board of Education will have held a proper open meeting if it gives the required notice. You meet at the announced location and time, conduct business within the scope of the agenda provided on the notice, and record the meeting and keep minutes. And then the closed meeting, first properly convene an open meeting, vote to authorize the meeting, etc. Address only the appropriate permitted topics during the closed meeting, and keep the required recordings of the meeting or complete the required affirmation about the meeting. So, with that, we'll have a couple of quizzes. Okay, so you have a county board of education has appropriately published its annual schedule of meetings. After the legislative sessions, new laws have been enacted which require consideration and action by the board beyond that which was expected within the annual schedule that was published. True or false? Where a board of education establishes an annual schedule of regular meetings, the board may not hold meetings which are not included in this notice of meeting. A, true. Proper notice must be given. This is not as easy as true or false. Proper notice must be given for all public meetings, and therefore meetings not listed on the annual notice cannot be held. B, true, a board is fully capable of foreseeing the future and is therefore bound to its annual schedule. C, false, the board may also schedule additional meetings or change the date, time, or location of regular meetings by providing appropriate notice. D, true, before the board may hold a meeting which is not listed on the annual notice, it must amend the annual notice to include the meeting. E, false, because the board is not required to establish an annual meeting schedule. The Open Meetings Act only requires a notice to be given for each specific meeting at least 24 hours before the meeting.
C and E.
C. All right.
Always only one answer in this
There's
question.
going to be just one answer. Okay.
Now I
False,
feel
the
like
board
I'm
may
being
also schedule
tricked.
additional meetings. We already kind of talked about this. The Act doesn't contain any limitation on scheduling additional meetings or on revising its schedule. It simply requires that an annual meeting schedule is established. Then notice of that schedule must be given. A public body which holds regular meetings that are scheduled in advance over the course of a year shall give public notice at least once a year. I don't think you have to also formally change your schedule every time. You do sort of effectively, but I don't think there's any formal notice that has to be made. That was why,
How many meetings did we hold during the pandemic?
yeah, precisely.
Right.
Okay, next question. The board president of a 7-member board becomes aware of an emergency situation demanding immediate action such that it is not possible to provide 24-hour notice. The board president sends an email to each board member informing them of the time and place of the meeting. The board president provides the best public notice of the meeting that he can, or she, by sending emails to the media and posting notices on the public notice website and district website and posting written notice at the district office. At the appointed time and place, the board president and one other board member meet. The other board members are not able to attend because of the short notice time resulting from the emergency. The board members present unanimously. They unanimously vote to hold present. Sorry, that's I write my questions and I can't even read them. The board members present unanimously vote to hold the emergency meeting and proceed to consider and vote on what action to take. Has the board complied with the Open and Public Meetings Act? Yes, the emergency meeting did not require 24-hour notice. No, without a quorum, no action can be taken. C, no, 2/3 of the board members must approve an emergency meeting. D, yes, the best practical notice was provided after informing. After informing, sorry, in my haste to write this question, it's a typo. Contacting the other board members, and no, the meeting was not included in the annual schedule of regular meetings. And I think you've already, there was no quorum, so there couldn't be action taken. You needed to have 4 board members present or participating. The Board of Education is in the open portion of its board meeting. Board member Mr. Jones anticipates that another board member, Ms. Smooth, is about to make a motion for board action that Mr. Jones feels is the wrong course of action and which he thinks is motivated by potential benefit to Ms. Smooth's business interests, which Mr. Jones learned about just as the meeting was about to begin. He feels that 2 other board members who appear to be undecided on the issue should know about this potential conflict of interest, but does not want to embarrass Ms. Smooth by disclosing this information before the members of the public present in the meeting. He therefore sends a text message to the 2 other board members informing them about Ms. Smooth's business interests. True or false? Mr. Jones has violated the Open and Public Meetings Act. Whoops. I went too fast. Let's see. I almost gave it away. False. 2 other board members along with Mr. Jones constitutes a quorum, and therefore the messages are not an unlawful electronic meeting. Board members are prohibited from sending electronic messages to other board members during an open meeting. C, false, because the messages were sent individually. The communications are not an unlawful electronic meeting. D, true, a board member is prohibited from expressing an opinion to another board member at any time about their position on a potential motion before a vote is taken on the motion. E, true, because the message related to a potential conflict of interest and Mr. Jones was unable to convey this information to the other board members before the meeting. This was a permissible emergency notification of possible ethical violation. Yes, it's B. Board members are prohibited from sending electronic messages to other board members during an open meeting. This specific exception is just limiting emails between board members. You can get information from your spouse. You can get information from the superintendent. But you cannot have electronic communications to each other during the board meeting. That's the summary.
So what if it's something like, can we take a break? Because someone has.
It's
Can they text
probably
something like
technically
that?
a violation,
Okay.
right? So maybe you should text it to the superintendent to text.
Could you whisper to Tracy?
Yeah, only a couple more.
Online.
If it's not electronic.
And I give these just because the intent is we have a little bit of time and we have some new board members, and you can see that they're not always as yes and no. And some of these would be right, but they're the wrong reasons. I didn't want to go through them each specifically, but So the meeting notice for the Board of Education's monthly board meeting includes the following item: closed meeting for discussion of the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual. This item has been included because of a controversy regarding the football coach at Oasis High School, including both complaints about the coach's abrasive and allegedly abusive interaction with team members and expressions of support from others in view of the football team's championship record. When the board reaches this agenda item, the required motion is made to move to a closed session. Speaking to the motion, one board member urges the board to have the discussion in open session so that the members of the public will know that the matter has been given full consideration. Which of the following is the most correct? A, the board could properly hold a closed meeting to discuss these complaints, but could also decide to discuss the complaints in an open meeting. B, the board must discuss these complaints in closed meeting to avoid possible claims of defamation by the coach and to protect the identity of the complainants and prevent retaliation. C, the board may not properly hold a closed meeting in this setting because the allegations about the coach include claims of abuse. D, if a majority of the board votes to hold the closed meeting must be held. The board cannot discuss the matter in closed session because the notice did not state the board was considering potential litigation. And if you've made your choice, this is simply A. This was your example. You didn't even know I had a quiz question coming on it. There may be reasons, there may, that you elect not to go into closed, even though you can. And D was incorrect because a simple majority is not enough to authorize a closed meeting. Had 2/3 voted to go in closed session, then you would have gone into closed session, even if somebody wanted to discuss it. So. If you have specific questions, you can always ask me. Board leadership, John's very versed with this as well as your more experienced board members. I would just encourage you to keep in mind when we go in closed session to try to stay on the appropriate reasons that we've been there.
We don't have a quorum outside of a meeting setting. I go to lunch with one or two of other board members. I can talk about anything I want.
Correct. And truthfully, that's why committees have only 3 board members, is so we don't have to notice them up for meetings. There's not a quorum present. It's not to avoid transparency. It just saves a whole bunch of administrative difficulty.
Just to piggyback on that question, what about closed session? Talking about a closed session item outside of a board meeting with someone that was in the closed session, and with someone outside of the closed session.
Yeah, the discussions about closed session is really not the Open Meeting Act. It's more of a GRAMA Act, but what's discussed in closed session, you're not supposed to share outside of, unless the board has authorized you to discuss that. So matters that are discussed in closed session, you need to keep those confidential. Oh, to each other? You probably, it's difficult to say that you're disclosing anything that was in the closed meeting to somebody that wasn't allowed to hear that, so. Yeah, so you can't take votes in closed session. We didn't go over that. You obviously can discuss and get guidance, but there are certain things that you need to then do in open afterwards, but we don't need to go into that. Any other questions?
Okay, thank you. And thank you for the electronic copy of that booklet. It's good to have.
So I have a question here. It says, board members will meet legal requirements for open meeting law training. Was that what this just was? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So technically, Board Member Robinson's going to have to do some training outside of this, which is available online. There's multiple places to do this online as well, and including the Master Boards Award includes part of that as well. But now this kind of takes care of that.
When we went to the new board member workshop, that also counts, right?
I think probably yes.
Okay, our next agenda item is to review Board Policy GP 103, board members' principles of operation, conduct, and ethics. And the reason I brought this policy forward was just reading over it, and the first thing on the policy, B, number 1, says board members shall annually, by the first Board of Education meeting in January, or upon discovery, disclose their involvements with other organizations, with vendors, or any associations that are or might reasonably be seen as creating a conflict. And so since this is the first board meeting of January, I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention, that they need to disclose conflicts if they're aware of them now. There are times, and we've had this happen, where things have come up during the year, like maybe a bid comes along from a new vendor or something that some board member has a connection with, and you wouldn't know that on this January date. But at that time you could declare that conflict of interest and then remove yourself from any discussion on that item. So any questions on that? Okay, I thought it would also be a good time to just review a few things on this policy while we've got it here too, particularly for the new board members if they have not read it yet. I thought about doing a quiz, but did not. Not as good as Mr. Ben Coleman. So I'll just go over and highlight a few things. The first section talks about conflict of interest. The second section talks about board members shall recognize that authority rests with the whole board. And I just had an interesting conversation with Mayor Palmer. He watched our leadership election and was like, oh, I've never seen that at city council. And that's because they have an elected mayor. I mean, the people have elected the leader there, and it's different within us, but the president doesn't have any more authority than anyone else on the board. We're a 7-member board, and we all have equal authority. And there's no decision unless the 7 have voted on something and made a decision. So it's different than how some other bodies potentially work. Just when speaking with the public or press or any other entities, individual board members don't have any authority to speak for the board unless they were authorized or unless they were just, stating what board decisions are. It is appropriate to use your title, Jordan Board of Education member. There's a social media section here that is when we post or say things on social media, we need to make sure that our post reflects that we're speaking as an individual and not for the board. We shouldn't post statements that make it appear as if we've already formed an opinion before they're before the board. And again, make sure you're only posting things that are in open meeting, nothing that's been discussed in closed meeting. And the last one, not accused by name or position a Jordan District employee of wrongdoing. Next section talks about just the high honor and responsibility it is to be a board member, to put students first, to understand that a basic function of a board member is policy making, not administration. And I think that's one of the challenges really as a board member when, someone calls us with an issue, we have to make that decision. Do we have a policy? Is it good? And was it followed? And if it wasn't followed, then we give that to the superintendent, to handle the fact that it wasn't followed. But is the policy not good? Maybe we need to change the policy. That's the board's work that we need to be doing. Another one, number 5, we represent the entire school community, not just the precinct from which we were elected. That's always kind of a balance because we want to speak for our precinct. Those are the people that we interact with and know best, but we have to make decisions based on the whole. see. The next section, F, is, respecting relationships within the board, and then G is respecting the relationships with superintendent and staff. And then H is our responsibility to the community. And I goes over how we run our board meetings, that we attend meetings prepared to participate, focus on policies, and keep the discussion centered on the agenda. Number 4, we generally hold discussion after a motion and a second with allowance for each members to speak on an issue. That's basic parliamentary procedure, which we always hold to when we're in our business meetings. In our study sessions, we generally have more just kind of open discussion on things. Although if we need to make a decision or move forward, I would call for a motion. But you don't have to wait for me to call for a motion. If any of you want to make a motion at any point in time to move things forward, that is, something that's welcome and helpful for you to do. Last section is talking about, that we need to have a focus on strategic leadership and, future thinking, being proactive instead of reactive. Any questions on this policy? Okay, just encourage you, if you have not read it recently, to read it over as a good reminder. And this is our own board policy, so we as a board wrote it at one point in time. And if you have any changes you feel need to be made, that is always something that's in the board's prerogative too. Our next agenda item is Utah School Boards Association Conference Debrief. Our board attended Utah School Boards Association Conference. It was held here at the Little America in Salt Lake this last weekend, Thursday through Saturday. And that is something where we do invest resources in order to pay for our board members to attend that conference. And as such, feel that it's important to give an accounting of what we learned and some of our takeaways from that conference. So does anyone want to start?
I'll start. From one of the keynote speakers, he brought up 3 questions that are frequently possibly used in exit interviews, but that they could be helpful questions to ask employees regularly, or anyway. And one of them was, what can I do to keep you here? What is getting in the way of your success? And what can I do to help you get there? And I just thought, anyway, I just like those questions. Anyway.
Yeah, I thought that too. I'm like, ooh, I need to ask those to some people.
Yeah, I even asked my sister, who's a teacher, those questions, and she said, oh my goodness, I would love it if my administrator asked me these questions. So, or anybody, anyway. So
yeah.
I like the fact that he also added, after those 3 questions, he added kind of a 4th, and that it really isn't a question, but he just said, listen wisely. And I thought that was great, because he said great mentors are always being mentored. And I really like that too. The other thing that I really liked about the keynote, his quote is, the moments that matter. And I was really taken by that, and I listened to it throughout his speech, and those moments really mattered to me. Do you want me to go on?
Sure.
I went to several sessions, of course, but the legislative session, I was impressed with the 4-step process of being informed, staying connected, attend events, and take action. And I think those are 4 really important things to remember in the legislative process, especially as we're starting up on next week, I guess, huh? And so I was really impressed by that. And I also went to the policy session, And I love the fact that they asked, what can I learn today? And policy makes peace of mind. And I thought about that for a long time, and I thought, if we didn't have policy, where would we be? You've got to have something that you can rely on and go back to in order to have peace of mind. And so I thought that was great. They also said that there had to be a clear purpose, priorities, process, and perspective. And I love that. And the last one that I went to was Tammy Pfeiffer's Dignity Index. And I absolutely loved that because it was very thought-provoking. You ask yourself in any given situation, where do I fall? Where am I? From 1 to 8, where am I on this dignity index? And I think it makes you and urges you to try and improve your dignity standing. And so that gave me a lot of food for thought. So.
Yeah, sure. So just following along with Tammy Pfeiffer's message about the Dignity Index, she talked about a time when Governor Herbert was talking to someone who had a very different political standing than he held himself. And they were kind of joking about how could that be an explosive conversation. And he said, no, I'm conservative in principle, moderate in tone, and inclusive in practice. I thought that was so profound, like guiding principles for the way that I hope that I interact. That just because you have a strong feeling in principle, it doesn't mean that you can't be inclusive in practice and moderate in tone. I thought that was really powerful. Something that I thought was really pertinent was I went to a class about the ability to hire our education support professionals and the crisis that we're really all in right now in the state of Utah with just the economy being what it is, the hiring market, and some of the information or the tools that we have available to us. And I think that it's always nice to sit in a session and say, I am so grateful for our superintendent and his cabinet for their innovation and the way that they are already manipulating these tools. I think that we really have great leadership at the helm here. But I just talked a little bit about recognizing that compensation isn't the only currency that we have, and that we have opportunities to really reach out and make a difference in the lives of all of our employees, not only education support professionals, but gave me an opportunity to think about the interactions that I have when I'm at a school and wondering if I'm leaving behind that kind of currency that can't be held. That as I go and interact, I hope that I'm taking opportunities to build relationships and to recognize greatness and provide opportunities to our employees. And so I think that's important, even if we're not hiring. It was also really interesting to see in that session, he gave us a handout that kind of took all of the categories of educational support professionals and ranked all of the districts in Utah side by side. It was really a lot of food for thought. And that's something that I think I can pass on. I don't know if everybody got that. It was like he had multiple handouts, and as I talked to those that had gone to that session, it didn't sound like everybody got that. So I can share that coming up. And then just talking about like what's really causing some of our shortages. I also enjoyed the legislative hot topics session where we had a panel of 2 legislators, and one of the takeaways that I received from that was just the importance of our interactions with our legislature during the session, how they appreciate being reached out to. They said they prefer text during the session, which I thought was good information, and just making sure that we're always identifying who we are. He said, don't ever be ashamed to drop your title. That actually helps me as I'm receiving your text messages. So just some good parameters to keep in mind as we jump into the session here in a couple of weeks.
Way I did reach out to one of those, and I followed their guidelines, and I haven't received a response yet.
Ah.
I attended the class 2 on classified employees. I didn't get that handout though. Just one thing too to watch. It usually takes a few days, but USBA tries to get all the handouts from all the presenters and uploads them to the USBA website. So you can go on their website, under conferences, and conferences materials will be on there. So you might need to give it a few days or a week, but can check back there for handouts on things. Mr. Larson.
Along with that ESP worker shortage class, they brought up something that was a unique perspective to me, and that was that districts across the state have the exact same problem. We are all experiencing a massive ESP shortage. The different perspective, though, came when they said that we are also trying to hire more ESP now by a lot more than we have prior to that because of TSSA and Trustlands.
Mm-hmm.
So it was an interesting perspective that we have this massive shortage brought about because of restrictions in funding that came about through the legislature, and the remedy to that the legislature is proposing is more pay for teachers. So it was ironic to me, the disconnect there. And when they brought that out, I thought, wow, that was profound.
That really struck me too, because I've long been frustrated that with Land Trust and TSSA money, we're not hiring more teachers. We're using it for, aides and paraprofessionals, which are great, but, we feel like, there's always the concern that that's not ongoing money, so we can't hire more teachers with it. And I'd love to get that changed. Okay.
I can comment on one of the breakout sessions I went to was about teen centers in primarily high schools. I was unaware that there are over 15,000 students in Utah that are classified as homeless. When I heard that statistic, the first question that came to my mind was, what's the definition of homeless? I don't know the answer to that. I didn't get the answer to that, at least in a way that I could understand it very well. But yeah, it was an interesting statistic. Davis County, or Davis School District, I think were the ones that were presenting, and they've done this. They have several, apparently, teen centers associated with some of their high schools. And they mentioned that these homeless students are twice as likely to miss school, and it just seems obvious that they're going to perform poorly compared to others. And so what the teen centers do is they provide 2 meals a day, shower facilities, shelter, qualified and caring adults. Those are kind of the 4 main areas that they mentioned. And again, I had a question come to mind. Why are the schools providing these services? Why is public education providing basic needs services to students? That question was addressed and the answer was that schools have the infrastructure already in place to handle most of those things. But it still, in my mind, it still begs the question. My understanding is we're tasked with providing an education, and someone might argue, well, this person can't receive an education because they don't have enough, they don't have the right diet, they're not getting the proper food, proper care, their clothes aren't laundered. So there can definitely be an argument made, and don't misunderstand me. I think it's a great effort to help any struggling teenager or anyone for that matter. I'm just questioning the role of public education in providing those services. So maybe as this topic, if it comes before the board, I think, Tracy, you mentioned that we had a grant or...
Told me that at the conference. I haven't confirmed that. I'd grant to put one in one of our schools.
But yeah, maybe as this topic comes before the board, I'd like to have some discussion around the proper role of local school boards to provide these types of services.
Okay, anyone else? Mr. Larson or Dr. Godfrey, do you have anything to add?
I liked the Dignity Index presentation as well. I thought it had broad application just in the way we treat each other, and I think it works well for administrators and school board members, but also for students and for teachers and members of the public, and it's just a good way of looking at and interacting with those we may disagree with. So I think it's a good tool. And I really appreciate the opportunity to connect with other districts. And I talked with board members and superintendents and business administrators from any number of districts while I was there. And there's a lot of value in those connections, and we talked about issues with each other. So it strengthens those relationships, but we also had a lot of substantive conversations about what we're each doing and how we're handling difficult issues. So there's a lot of value in that, especially the fact that every district participated and every district in the state is a member of that organization. So I think that provides a rich experience. So I always look forward to it.
I agree. I think the most valuable thing about it is being able to talk to other board members and share ideas about how other people have handled things or what other people are doing. And every time I leave a conference, I'm incredibly grateful for our board and for our district. And it just reminds me once again that we're doing a lot of great things here. The Dignity Index class, the thing I really appreciate about that is we were talking about we need to have a culture of good conflict. It's okay to have conflict. It's okay amongst board members. We're going to disagree with each other, and we're going to have different opinions, and we're going to vote different ways, and that's good and that's healthy, and we should push back and be able to have honest disagreement while still maintaining dignity and respect and a culture of good conflict. I thought that was very applicable to board members, and then also just letting go of the need to win or be right and focus on what's the best policy for our students. And then finally, it was really fun to be in the Show Up Utah class. First Lady Abby Cox just did a class on her Show Up initiative, and I was a facilitator for it, so I was in there. But it was great because Jordan District is really on the forefront of implementing many things in the district, and have worked closely with that team on unified sports, particularly in our schools, and then also our participation as a district in the teacher conference, which they are having again this summer. Hey, thank you. Our next agenda item is board and superintendent reports and comments. Do we have any committee reports? Oh, government relations for sure. Anything? Nothing finance or facilities, I'm assuming. Okay, do you want to do government relations?
Absolutely. So hopefully everyone is aware that tomorrow is our legislative breakfast. We thought it would be a good idea to just run over what might happen at that breakfast today. So attached in your board docs is an agenda. So legislators will arrive around 7:30. We're in the tech atrium at Bingham High School. Just a reminder about that.
New tech atrium.
The new tech atrium overlooking the new library, right? That's exciting to be able to showcase that. So we're going to have,
Really quick, there will be some reserved parking in the,
Southwest.
thank you, southwest area of the parking lot for board members and legislators.
parking is going to be, we were glad for the rain today.
Always a problem at Bingham.
Get a few more stalls in there. So Tracy is going to conduct the event. We'll have welcome and introductions, musical numbers by the Magicals over there. And then I'm excited about some of our student and teacher highlights. So we wanted to give Dr. Godfrey an opportunity to talk about the work that he's been able to accomplish through his podcast. And then that will be a nice segue into having a student who has appeared on his podcast come, and she will be highlighting a teacher who has helped her through her education. So I think that will be really fun. After that, in years past, I think we've had kind of like a question and answer or discussion period. We wanted to try a little more guided discussion this time. So we decided to break up a couple of topics among, so the people who will be leading the conversation are members of the Government Relations Committee, but welcome input and comments from our visitors or also any of you. So I'll give an overview of our legislative priorities from our district, and then Tracy will talk a little bit about how we've spent our WPU and where that money is going. And then Marilyn will talk about safety and wellness, and that's physical and health, right? So our mental health and some of the important things that our district is doing on that front. So hopefully we can be concise and respectful of their time, but always the most important thing that we get from that breakfast is the opportunity to rub shoulders with the leadership of our state as they're going into session. So appreciate all of your efforts tomorrow morning in that. Any questions or clarifications I can make?
Sorry, but I will not be in attendance for employment reasons.
We will miss you.
I think just the only other thing I'd bring up that we'll have several legislators potentially attending that we haven't seen in the past because of redistricting. And most have RSVP'd. A couple have sent their regrets as well. One has a sick child and won't make it tomorrow morning because of childcare, and others can't make it for various reasons. But there will be new new legislators that we haven't interacted with as much in the past. So.
Great. Okay.
I have a facilities issue. Just want to
Okay.
report to the board that Scott and Paul are working on a purchase and sell agreement with the Wood Ranch representatives for the purchase of the elementary school property.
You. Okay, any other board member reports? I've got a couple. First of all, from Utah School Boards Association, thank you to everyone who attended the conference. And then just on your calendar, February 6th is USBA Day on the Hill, and that's all board members across the state invited up that day. There will be speakers, a tour of the Capitol, and then opportunities to watch floor time and interact
Are there
with
specific
legislators.
times that we should try to be there, or is it just pop in when you can?
Yeah, 9 a.m. It starts actually from 9 to 11. They'll split districts up, but half will do a tour of the Capitol. And this is the real tour, the underground tour, the places you don't normally see tour. Yeah. Well, half hear from the speakers, and then it'll switch and you'll hear from the speakers. We used to all meet together, but with construction up there's actually no rooms up there anymore that will hold 2 sessions. And then as a board, we will, and Government Relations Committee can plan this, but contact our legislators and find a time to meet up with them for that. There are also, during that day. And there will be student groups in the rotunda, and we have our welding students from JATC South that will have a display in the rotunda. Excited to highlight that program. Something unique that our legislators probably don't realize we even have in our schools. And then also you saw on the agenda for our breakfast tomorrow, a couple dates for our board to be up at the legislature with our student body officers, our student body presidents, and then also a board lunch during the session. Session starts a week from today is when the session starts. And then JLC, the Joint Legislative Committee, and that's with USBA and the superintendents and the business administrators, they start meeting a week from Friday. And they will be meeting every Friday and going over bills. And you should be getting a weekly update from USBA on bills and the position that USBA has taken on those bills. I am, by virtue of being the USBA board member, I'm also the JLC representative. So each week I'll be voting at that meeting. Other board members are welcome to come if you want to come. But if you have input on bills, feel free to reach out to me or any member of government relations at any time for that. Marilyn, thanks for taking care of our students that are here. Welcome. It's good to have you here. We had a couple more earlier too. Okay, that's USBA. Jordan Education Foundation, the Donor Appreciation Lunch is tomorrow. It's a busy day tomorrow. I know we've got a breakfast in the morning, but if you can make it to the lunch, that's also a really great opportunity to find out more about the foundation. It starts at 11:30. It's here in this building. There will be booths out here of all the different things that the Jordan Education Foundation is involved in, and then they'll move into that room for the Donor Appreciation Lunch. We got a letter, actually got it twice, addressed to the Board of Education from South Jordan City, letting us know that Kennecott Copper has filed an annexation petition to annex a very large chunk of land into South Jordan City. And I will pass that around. There's a map. It's all west of Bacchus Highway, 118th South area. It's about half the size of Daybreak. Yikes. Part of South Jordan City. So I don't know if how that will affect us. I mean, it does.
Just so you know, that does not come as a surprise.
Yeah.
We've heard about this for a while. So we are not surprised by this.
It's official. It's public knowledge now that South Jordan City will be
Is that the area?
growing.
Is that the area kind of where Old Lark used to be? I thought.
Okay, and then lastly, at the beginning of this new board term, we will be redoing our committees. And so I want you as board members, here's your assignment. First of all, do we have the right committees? Do we need to get rid of any committees, add new committees? Are committees working? So I want your feedback on that. Also, what committees do you want to be on? And if you have recommendations for chairs or committee membership, would like to know that from each of you. An executive committee will meet and start working on those assignments, bring them back, collaborate with everybody on that. So if you could let me or a member of executive committee know by the end of this week, any of your thoughts and feedbacks on committees, what committees you want to be on, and who you think should be on committees, that would be really great. I'll send out the list tomorrow of what committees we have. It's also on the website under our board policy section. Okay, any other board things? We'll go to superintendent.
My comment is just that we have the Health and Wellness Day coming up on February 10th. We'll be sending out an email to parents about how they can access the electronic resources for them to focus on health and wellness with their family. These are external resources and internal resources that are meant to be a support that day. So it's a virtual learning day and family-directed virtual learning day. And we have a lot of sponsors supporting activities for our employees that day. That's really exciting. Last year, the board suggested buying a meal for every employee that week, and we did not arrange that for the Friday so that the health and wellness of those who help arrange those meals could be attended to on Friday. And we also offered Swig drinks in a partnership with Swig, and that was a nice thing. Show your badge and get the drink of your choice. Endless Summer is my personal favorite. What educator doesn't want an endless summer? But so I just wanted to see if the board is supportive of offering the meal and drink again. It was quite wildly successful last time. If we can do that again, that would be great.
Board members, is everyone okay moving forward with that?
Please do.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll send out details soon, and we're excited to do that again. The health and wellness team and student services have worked really hard to make sure this is a great year for all of our employees. That's every employee that gets to benefit from that. So we'll include you on that information. And family and student, and it's everyone in Jordan District that gets to benefit from that.
Great, thank you. Looking forward to it.
Thanks.
All right, that is the end of our agenda. Thank you for all of those who have joined us. I do need a motion to go into closed session for character and competence of individuals, potential litigation, and negotiations.
I'll make the motion to go into closed session for character and competence of individuals, potential litigation, and negotiations.
And I need a second on that.
Second.
Okay, motion by Ms. Richards, second by Ms. George to go into closed session. All in favor of that motion, please say yes. Yes. Is there anyone opposed? That motion passes unanimously. We are now in closed session, or we will now go into closed session. Thank you. 5-minute break.